guys, I want to give you 6 ideas here. And these are principles, so they apply to everything. So it could be relationships, it could be money, it could be health, it could be anything. So I'm going to give you 6 principles to provide better value. Okay? So these are going to apply to all of these things. Are we ready for that? Are we buckled up and ready? Okay, here we go. We have to give value to people that they care about. We have to give value that they care about. Let me give you an example. So let's say I have a great friend who I want to help them feel better. I want to create a better friendship with them. And I think to myself, you know what? I love video games. And so I'm going to get my friend a new video game because I think that's going to make it a better friendship. So you buy a new video game, you save your money, you buy a new video game, you put a lot of effort into it. It's a really hard thing to do. And you take this video game to them, you hand it to them, and they look at it and they're like, oh, thanks. And they set it aside and they never look at it again. Now, first of all, how do you feel? You feel kind of low, right? So you went to all that effort to try to do something for them and they were kind of like, eh. But what happened there? What was the problem? The problem was you tried to provide value to them that you like. What should you have done instead? You probably should have gone and said, hey, what could I do to help you? What do you like? Find out more about them. Maybe your friend loves hugs. And if you would come and give them a big hug, they would really value that.
It'd be a lot cheaper than.
And it'd be a lot cheaper than a video game. That's right. So you have to understand what people want. You guys, I see this in business all the time. So let's talk money. Okay? Let me give you an example from my book. There's a horse in a corral, okay? And the horse has a colt or a foal, so a small horse. And they're out there in the corral. And the character in the book and her grandfather go out to feed the horse. They walk out to the corral, and as they get there, Grandpa pulls out from his pocket sugar cubes. Now, I love sugar cubes, and horses love sugar cubes. And Grandpa holds the sugar cubes over the side of the fence. Okay? And immediately what happens is the older horse, the mare, runs over to Grandpa and starts to eat the sugar cubes. But the colt just stands over there. And so the little girl says, well, Grandpa, why doesn't the colt come over and get sugar cubes? Is she scared of you? What's the problem? Okay? Is that the problem? Do you guys know what the problem is? What's the problem? Darren? The colt doesn't value the sugar cubes. Are the sugar cubes bad? No, they're good sugar cubes, but the colt's never had a sugar cube. The colt doesn't know what a sugar cube is. So how does it know that the little white thing in that man's hand is something that I should go and eat? The fact is, it doesn't know that. So what Grandpa does is he grabs a bucket of oats. Now the colt's had oats before, and he holds the oats over the side of the fence, and then what does the colt do? It runs right over. It runs straight over and starts to eat oats. And then guess what Grandpa does? He takes a sugar cube out of his pocket, and as it's eating oats, he sticks a sugar cube in its mouth. And the colt stands up straight, and now what does the colt want? Sugar cubes, right? So the colt's now like, I want more sugar cubes. He starts trying to get it out of his pocket. Okay, so the point of that story, you guys, is so many times in our friendships or in our businesses or whatever we're doing, we think to ourselves, oh, I know what I like. We think to ourselves, oh, I'm like, let's say we're trying to start a business and we're like, oh, I'm really good at sewing blankets. And so we start to sew blankets, and I like motorcycles, and so I sew up a motorcycle blanket, and I finish it, and then I go out and I go to a big group of girls, and I'm like, look at this beautiful motorcycle blanket that I made. It's black and red. Isn't this awesome? And that little group of girls of maybe 12 and 13-year-old girls look at my red and black motorcycle blanket, which I think is awesome, which it would be. But they're like, what is that ugly blanket? I'm like, it's only $35. Now, to me, that's a good value because I spent 20 hours trying to get it done. And I'm like, $35 is a steal. It's the best blanket ever. And they look at me like, are you crazy? I would never buy a black and red motorcycle blanket. And I'm like, oh my. So what happened? I tried to offer them a sugar cube, but they didn't recognize the sugar cube. They didn't know that it was valuable. They didn't know that it was good. Just like with my video game to my friend, I walk up and I'm like, this is the coolest video game I've played in the last 10 years. I hand it, you guys are, 10 years is too long for you guys. This is the coolest video game I've played in the last year, because 10 years is like most of your life, right? So it's the best video game. And so they're like, I don't care about video games. So many times, what we do is we try to offer something that we care about, but the other people don't care about. If I care about it and they don't care about it, is it valuable to them? No. Not one little bit, is it? So the key, go ahead, yes.
But if you try to sell it to someone else, such as my brother.
Okay, so if I had something, a cool motorcycle blank that was red and black, and I take it to the girls and they hate it, there's two things I can do. I can crumple it up and burn it because nobody wants it. Or I could go and I could try to find somebody that I think might want it. I guess there's three things. The third thing I could do is I could go back to my house and I could be like, okay, they didn't like my red and black blanket. And I'd go to my sister and say, hey, if I made a blanket, what would you want it to be? And they're like, well, I would probably prefer something that was like these colors and this thing. Okay, and then I could make a new blanket, and then I could go out and I could go back to that group of girls and be like, now look at my blanket. And they'd be like, oh, that's awesome, I love that. And they'd pay me $35. And then I'd be like, hey, do you have a brother? And then I would give them the sugar cube, right? Because once they know that I have something valuable, I can give them other things. In business, this is a really important, and when you're trying to create a business or you're trying to earn more money, this is a really important thing. Let's say that you don't have a business. Let's say you just have a job. You work for somebody. Why do you get paid every day to go to your job? Is it because you're a cool person? No. Why do you get paid?
Because they value what you're doing.
Because they value what you're doing for them. And if you want to make more money in your job and you want to have a pay increase and you want to have something, what do you have to do? You have to provide more value. You guys, this is a principle that in every aspect, if you want more of something, you have to provide more value. On the flip side of that same coin, one of our scarcity mentalities for us, for a lot of us, is we say, I don't have enough time. We all agreed that we say that quite often. Guess what? There are certain things in our lives that have value, and there are certain things in our lives that have no value. Guess what happens if we spend all our time on things that have no value? You guys, this is really important. So not only is it important that we recognize this value proposition when we do things for other people, but in our own lives, if you want to have more in your life, if you want to have a better story, you have to stop doing those things that have no value and doing things that have value. Okay? So number one, remember this. The number one thing you have to do to create value is you have to always offer the value that they care about. Don't try to offer your value. Don't try to offer what you care about. Always offer what they care about. And how do we find out? How do we know what they care about?
You ask.
You ask. That's it. This seems like a crazy thing, right, you guys? But it's so simple. If you have a friend that you want to know how to help them, ask them. If you have a business and you want to know what your customers want, ask them. If you have a job and you want to have a promotion, ask them what you have to do. You have to ask. Okay, we're going to go on. So the number two thing. You everybody ready? We got number two. So number one was what? We have to always do what they care about. Number two, what do they care about? You guys have to think about this. The things that people care about, there's two things. The first thing that you want to do if you're trying to offer value to anybody in any situation is you have to solve one of their problems. So try and solve a problem. Number two is you need to do something for them that they can't do for themselves. Okay? So if you're trying to create value for someone, you have to either solve one of their problems or do something for them that they don't do for themselves. That's number two. Number three, you guys, is remember the focus can't be about us. It has to be about the other people. Let me give you an example. So growing up in Moab in middle school, this new kid moved into school. And he was a really nice kid, and I really liked him. And so we hung out quite a bit. But for some reason, the other kids were always teasing him and picking on him and doing all these things. And it really drove him nuts. They were always pretty mean to him. And after a while, he was just getting so frustrated. He came to me and said, Nephi, why do the kids keep picking on me? And I said, I don't know. But I think it's just because you're new, and I think over time it will go away. So about 3 months later, the kids are still just picking on this kid all the time. And it was getting close to Christmas break. And so a group of us friends got together, and I invited this kid to come and hang out with us. And as he came for the Christmas party, I think, he came in, and he brought with him his cousin. And it's a group of guys and girls and some of my closest friends. And this new kid brought his cousin with him, who was a really cute girl. And all of a sudden, all these other boys that had been so mean to this kid for so long, guess how they started to act? They changed their attitude. Now, why were they changed the attitude? Did they all of a sudden realize that this kid was a really cool kid? No. It had everything to do with something that they wanted. They wanted to meet the cute girl. So suddenly they started treating this boy really nice. But guess what? He didn't introduce them to his cousin. He introduced his cousin to the people that had been nice to him. And here's the point. Here is the point and the moral of that story, is that if you focus on yourself and what you want only, then you're not able to provide value to others. You always have to think of others first. You have to put them in the first position. Okay? Everybody with me with that? All right. Number 4, don't promise things you can't deliver. If you want to provide value, don't promise things that you can't deliver. Another story. I've got like 4 stories, so we're going to go rapid fire here, okay? When I was in kindergarten, I used to ride the bus. If you ride the bus, raise your hand. Some of us ride the bus. So in kindergarten, I'd get on, and there's this older kid at the back of the bus, and I thought he was really cool. And I would kind of like try to go sit by him. And after a few weeks, and I tried to start talking to him, and we started to become pretty good friends. And he was an older kid, and we talked a lot about, I loved motorcycles. I've always loved motorcycles. And we started talking about motorcycles and four-wheelers and all these cool things. And I was thinking to myself, man, I wish there was something I could say or do to make this kid like me better, because he was a cool kid, and I wanted to be like his friend. And so I started and one day, I will never know why I said this, but one day, I get on the bus, and we sit down, and we're talking about four-wheelers. And I say to this kid, as a kindergarten, and I'm dead serious, I say, you know what? I know how to make four-wheelers. And the kid looks at me like, really? And I was like, yeah, I know how to make four-wheelers. In fact, if I just had a screwdriver right now, I could make a four-wheeler. And he's like, really? And I was like, oh yeah, I could totally make a four-wheeler. So for the next week or two, every time we got on the bus, we'd just be talking and I'd be like, if I just had a screwdriver, I would totally make one right here for you. And the kid's like, that is so amazing. So about 2 weeks later, I get on the bus, and I'm walking to the back, and I'm sitting down with this cool kid, and he says, I got something for you. And I'm like, oh, cool, what do you got? And he reaches into his bag, and he pulls out a Phillips head screwdriver. And he says, let's do it. He's serious. He's like, let's make this thing. And I was like, oh no, what do I do? So I take the screwdriver from him, and I get down on the floor, and I start to unscrew the seat from the bottom of the bus. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here, taking screws out. And we get to school, and I escape. And then for the next, I begged my dad to take me to school every day for a week, because I couldn't face the kid with his screwdriver again, because I didn't know what to say. And I finally had to fess up, and I'm like, you know what? There's no way I can make a screwdriver. I have no idea how to do that. Or four-wheeler. Thank you for correcting that. So I made a promise, you guys, that there was no way a kindergartner with a screwdriver is going to make a four-wheeler on a bus, right? I made a promise that I couldn't keep. But there's a lesson there. When we're trying to create real value for people, we have to be really careful that we only promise the things and only commit to do the things that we can actually do. What's the worst thing that can happen if you are trying to be friends with someone and you promise them something? You say, yeah, I'll call you tonight, or I'll do this, or I'll do that, and then you don't. Right? Or if you're a business owner and you go out and you tell your customers, oh yeah, totally, I can build a rocket to send you to the moon. And then they're like, all right, here's the money, give me my rocket. And you're like, oh crap, I can't build a rocket to send you to the moon. Right? So you always have to promise only the things that you can deliver. Okay? Number 5, I think we're on 5 now. And this is really important, you guys. Don't destroy value. Don't destroy value. So I tell my kids these stories sometimes, and I have to start the story by saying, once there was a boy named Nephi that totally wasn't me. And I say that because it usually means this boy named Nephi does something really, really stupid in the story. And so I don't, like, it's teasing. They know it's totally me, but I don't want to say it's me. So this, you guys, is a story about a boy named Nephi that totally wasn't me. I was about 10 or 11. We had some friends over to our house, and we were playing, and we like to play outside. We played Army and all kinds of fun games. And near our house was an old, like there was a place where a guy parked a lot of his old vehicles, and he had like a crane and like all this equipment and cars. And we liked to go out there and play in them. We'd get inside the cars and pretend we were driving, and it was awesome. It was like the greatest place ever. Well, one day we had some friends come over, and we were out playing in the cars, and we're sitting there, and I don't have any idea what like went through this kid's head. But I watch as this kid that we had over to our house, he walks over and he bends down and he picks up this enormous rock. It's like really heavy. And he walks up towards the car and he lifts it above his head and he gets really close and then he just throws it right at the windshield of the car. And the rock comes down on the windshield of that car and it goes and it shatters. And the rock's sitting in the windshield. Now, most of you guys had the reaction that I should have had. Oh my goodness, why did you do that? Instead, it wasn't me, by the way. I didn't have that. The boy named Nephi had that reaction. The reaction the boy named Nephi had was, holy cow, that's cool. And so all of us then proceeded to grab big rocks, and we went around to every one of those vehicles and smashed out in a spectacular fashion every single piece of glass. Boom, 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 boom. There were probably 20 windshields and side windows and back windows. I mean, and you guys are laughing because it's like crazy we did that. You have no idea how much that money that cost. That glass is extremely expensive. We're probably talking $10,000 worth of damage that we did with our rocks that afternoon. So, we had a great time. We finish up, we put the rocks down, and we walk home, thinking that was a great time. That was fun. But on the inside, knowing like that was really not a very good thing to do. I hope nobody finds out about that. And I remember vividly, you guys, I'm walking up to the front of my house, and I see my dad coming out the door. And he's coming out with a purpose. He's not like nonchalantly coming out the door. He's coming out with a purpose. And he sees us, and he looks right at us, and I know that I'm a dead man. And so I like kind of crumple to the ground because I didn't know what else to do. I like fall on the ground, and my older brother takes off running into the desert. Like we lived out in the middle of nowhere. He just takes off running. Like he is gone. He's nowhere. He's going to be anywhere near this thing. And my friend doesn't know what to do. He runs over and he crawls underneath, like the car that's parked in the driveway. So he's under the car. I'm just sitting on the ground, like in my fetal position, like waiting for the end to happen. And my brother's somewhere in the desert. Okay. So, needless to say, that was a really, really bad day for this boy named Nephi. Not me, okay? This boy named Nephi and his older brother. But the point, you guys, the point of that story, remember, do not destroy value. Don't do things that take value away from other people, okay? This is really important as well. It kind of plays into number 6, which is never try to create value by putting someone else lower. Never create value by trying to harm someone else. And what I mean by that is sometimes, I don't know if you guys have ever seen an advertisement for a company, but sometimes it will say something like, this other company is bad because of this, 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 and this, right? So they're trying to make themselves sound better because they're trying to make someone else sound worse. When I was a kid, I had a couple of friends that were both cousins. One was a little bit older than the other. And it was interesting because they were cousins. They were always together, but they didn't really like each other that much. And they wanted to be my friend. And so what would happen is one of them would invite me to come to his house. And the whole time that we're at his house, he would spend like half the time trying to convince me why he was a better friend to me than his cousin. And then the next day, his cousin would invite me to come over to his house. And he would spend half the time trying to convince me why he was a better friend than his other cousin. And it was like this back and forth, and it was horrible. I hated being in it. It was the most uncomfortable thing that ever. And so they spent all their time trying to convince me why the other person was a bad person, instead of just playing with me. I just wanted to play. I just wanted value, right? Playing with them was the value. But they didn't give me value because they spent all the time trying to tell me that someone else was worse. If you want to create value, don't do it at the expense of someone else. Don't do it in a way that you're trying to make yourself look better by making someone else look worse. 6 ideas for value creation. You guys, this lesson is so important. If you want anything, if you want more of anything in this life, stop focusing on yourself. If you want more money, don't think about how can I have more money. Not how can I have more money, but don't think about I have to have more money. It's for me. I'm going to buy these things and this and this and this. If you want a better relationship, don't think about yourself. If you want better health, don't think about how much you like eating banana cream pie. Instead, think about how can I go out and create value for my body? What does my body need? You have to focus outside of yourself. This is such a huge key, and I see people get it wrong all the time. They think to themselves, I just want to have more time, or I just want to have more money. And then all they do is think about themselves and how they're going to use the money once they have the money. And never once do they stop and say, how can I provide value to someone else? How can I make someone else's life better? How can I solve a problem for them? And how can I do something for them that they can't do for themselves? That is the core of value creation. And it's the wealth mentality way, and it's the way that we teach you guys to progress on this wealth path.